this lesson is going to be all about proportions, which is chapter 5 from your textbook. A proportion, let me turn to it real quick. Proportion is very similar to ratios. It's basically two ratios that are equal to each other. Now, the problem that we're going to come across is we don't know one of the numbers of 1/2 of our ratio. And so we're going to have to do a few little math steps in order to determine what that unknown number is. So with this proportion here, and again, I'm just going to work some of these problems out from your worksheet that's in your textbook from chapter 5. And I'm going to kind of work my way from some of the very simple, basic proportions to some of the ones that are a little bit more difficult, or at least some of the ones that require a few more math skills. Honestly, I guess the fortunate thing is in nursing or in healthcare in general, whenever we are working with proportions, they're normally very simple proportions like this one is. And there's not a whole lot of steps with your math, so yay, good for us. So with this proportion here, again, number 1 from your worksheet, it reads like this. 20 is to 400 as X is to 1,680. And what we have to do is determine what X is. And again, whatever X is going to make it equal to the other ratio. So in order to do that, we're going to take the two outer numbers, which are called your extremes, and we're going to multiply them together. And then we're going to take the two inner numbers, which are the means, and we're going to multiply them together. So I'll set up our equation, which is going to be 20 times 1,680 equals 400x. So I'm just going to do my simple math. 20 times 1680 equals 33,600. And again, I know that that equals 400x. What I don't know right now is what x is. So in order to determine what x is, all I have to do is divide 400 by both sides. Now, when I divide 400 by this side, it's just going to cancel itself out. So we really don't have to do anything there. We're just going to take this 400 and we're going to move it over to this side and divide this side by 400. And when I do that, I get 33,600 divided by 400, and my answer is 84. So x equals 84. That's my answer. Now, I can check my work by coming up here and plugging 84 in for x, and then multiplying my two extremes, and then multiplying my two means, and they should both equal the same number. So let's do that. Let's take 20 times, where we did that, 20 times 1,680 was 33,600. Now, if we take 400 and multiply it by 84, we get 33,600. So we know our math checks out. Our extremes, when we multiply them together, equal the same number as our means when we multiply them together. Okay? Let's try another simple one. The next one we will work on is number 2 from your workbook. And this one is 0.9 is to 2.4 as x is to 75. So let's set up our equation. I'm going to have 0.9 times 75 equals 2.4x. Do my math. 0.9 times 75 equals 67.5. Okay? So I'm now to here, 67.5 equals 2.5x. What I'm going to have to do is take this 2.4 and come over and divide. So 67.5 divided by 2.4 equals 28.125. Okay, so that's the answer that I got. And again, I could plug that in for x. I know that when I multiply 0.9 and 75 together, I get 67.5. And when I take 28.125 and multiply it by 2.4, I get 67.5. So I know that my answer is correct. Okay, so that is a simple proportion. Let's do one more pretty simple proportion. This one's just working with larger numbers. For whatever reason, sometimes when we start working with big numbers, we get a little bit intimidated, but we have a calculator, so it shouldn't be that scary at all. We're going to set up our equation identical to how we have been. So here's my proportion. 500,000 is to 1 as 300,000 is to x. So, and you could probably look at this and determine your answer, but we'll do a little work. Okay, so set up our equation. Now x is over here as part of our extreme. So 500,000x equals 300,000 times 1, which is basically going to get us 300,000. So we still have 500,000 equals 300,000 divided by 500,000. So let's do that. Let's take 300,000 divided by 500,000, and I get 0.6. So x equals 0.6, and that's your final answer. Okay? So very simple. We was working with big numbers, but we have a calculator, so it's really no big deal. We'll do one more just again for plenty of practice. Here we're working with some big numbers again. We have 800,000 is to 5 as 960,000 is to x. We'll set up our equation again. 800,000x equals 5 times 960,000. So we're going to actually have a very big number here. 960,000 times 5. 800,000x equals 4,800,000. Okay? So there we're to that point of our equation. And now I'm just going to take this 800,000 and divide. So take my 4,800,000 divided by 800,000, and I get 6. X equals 6. So very simple. Another thing that I'd like to point out, just so you don't get confused, when you're working your problem out, of course we're trying to determine x, and I'm using the multiplication sign of x. Some people, so they're not confused when they're trying to solve a problem to identify what x is, they use a dot. So don't get confused. This is a times mark, or you could use just a period in the middle, and that would be that would mean times as well, or multiplication as well. So, but this is the x over here that I'm trying to solve for. So don't get my x's mixed up. One's for multiplication, and one is a problem I'm trying to solve for. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the really simple, basic ones. And now we'll move up to one that's just, not much harder, but maybe a little bit more difficult, or a few more steps we're going to have to take. And that's when we have fractions. So this proportion says 5/6 is to x as 5/9 is to 4/5. So basically, we're just going to set up our equation like we normally do. So we're going to have 5/6 times, maybe I'll make the multiplication sign a small x, 4/5 equals 5/9 times x. So I'm going to do my simple multiplication, but before I multiply, I'm going to reduce. And I know that my 5s are going to cancel each other out. They both reduce each other out. And I know that 2 will go into 4 and 6. So 2 will go into 4 2 times, and 2 will go into 6 3 times. And now I'll just multiply straight across the board. 1 times 2 is 2, and 3 times 1 is 3. So I have 2/3 over here equals 5/9 times x. So now I need to bring this 5/9 over and divide it. So it would set up like this, 2/3 divided by 5/9. But again, I know whenever I have division of fractions, if I flip that second fraction over, then I can just multiply straight across. So that's actually going to turn into 2/3 times 9/5. And now I'll reduce. So I know that I know that 3 will go into 3 one time, 3 will go into 9 3 times, and now I'll multiply across. So 2 times 3 is 6, and 1 times 5 is 5. So I'm left with x equals 6/5. But again, we don't want to end with that improper fraction. So basically all we have to do now is take this improper fraction and turn it into a mixed number. And we do that by taking 5, dividing it into 6. I know that 5 will go into 6 one time. Okay, so my final answer ends up being, bring it up here, 1 1/5. X equals 1 1/5. Okay? So don't get scared or nervous when you're working with a fraction. Instead of a whole number, you're still doing the exact same steps. You're still setting your equation up the same way. You're still multiplying. You're still dividing. You're doing everything like you're supposed to. You're just dealing with a fraction. All right, of course, we will do another one. This one will be number 4 from your worksheet, and this one is 3 is to 90 as 1 3/4 is to x. So now we're here with a mixed number, and we're going to have to take that mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction. So we'll just kind of, so we'll set it up. So we might remember that in order to take a mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction, you're going to take your denominator, multiply it by the numerator, and then take your denominator, multiply it by the whole number, and then add your numerator. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So this ultimately is going to turn into 7/4. Okay? So now we have 3 is to 90 as 7/4 is to x. And now I'm going to set up my equation. So I'm going to multiply my extremes together. So 3x equals 90 times 7/4. So I'll just do my simple math. Basically, this 90 is going to have a 1 over it. And just looking here, I'm pretty sure that I can reduce 90 into 4. Let me see, 90. Well, we'll just reduce it by 2. So I know that 2 will go into 4 2 times, and 2 will go into 90 45 times. So now I will just multiply straight across. So 45 times 7 equals 315 over 2. And that can't be reduced. So now I'm stuck with this equation. 3x equals 315 halves. So now you know that you're going to take this 3x, or this 3, and divide it to the other side. So it's going to look like this. 315 halves divided by 3. I know that I'm going to flip that second fraction over so I can multiply. So that turns into 3/15 halves times 1/3. Okay. And I'm pretty darn sure that I can reduce this 315 divided by 3. It actually goes into it 105 times. So 3 will go into 3 one time. 3 will go into 315 105 times. And now I'll multiply straight across the board. So I end up with 105 halves. So I'm left with the improper fraction of 105 halves. I'm going to take that improper fraction and turn it into a mixed number. I'm going to do that by taking 2 and dividing it into 105. I know that 2 will go into 10 5 times. Bring down my 5. I know that 2 will go into 5 2 times. And ultimately, I am left with 52 1/2. Sorry, I wrote too big and I ran out of room. And out here. So this was my original proportion, and I had a mixed number of 1 3/4 that I changed into an improper fraction. So then I was left with 3 is to 90 as 7/4 is to x, and I set my proportion, or I set my equation up, 3x equals 90 times 7/4. I did that math, and I ended up with 3x equals 315 halves. I then knew that I had to divide 315 halves by 3. So I set that equation up like this, 315 halves divided by 3. Instead of dividing, I flipped that second fraction over so I can multiply straight across. So my new equation was 315 halves times 1/3. I was able to reduce. 3 went into 3 one time, 3 went into 315 105 times, and then I multiplied straight across, and I ended up with 105 halves. That was an improper fraction, so I took that improper fraction and turned it into a mixed number, and when I did that, x ended up being 52 halves. Okay? We'll do another one. This one's going to be number 18 from your worksheet. Again, just dealing with some fractions here. These fractions are a little bit higher numbers, still nothing to be intimidated by. I'm going to just set up my equation. It's going to be 1/5000 x equals 1/1000 times 5. Okay? So that's how I'm going to set that up. X is over here, so it's going to be 1/5000 times x equals 1/1000th times 5. Now sitting here, I know that I can reduce. I know that 5 will go into 1,000 200 times. So 5 will go into 5 one time, 5 will go into 1,000 200 times, and what I'm left with is 5 equals 1/200. Now I'm going to have to divide this 1/5000, this 1/5000th, divide it over here. So it's going to look like this. 1/200 divided by 1/5000. That's how I'll set it up, but I'm going to flip that 1 upside down and end up multiplying times 5,000. Now I know that 100, I can reduce this by 100ths, and I know that 25. Yeah. So 100 will go into 200 twice, and 100 will go into 50 times. So now I'm just going to multiply straight across. So I have 50 over 200. And it's an improper fraction, of course, so I can't leave it like that. So I'm going to have to change that improper fraction into a, actually, I can just reduce. You could do the math. You could change this improper fraction into a whole number is what you're going to end up with, or you could just reduce right here. So I know that 2 will go into 2 one time, and 2 will go into 50 25 times. So I could just do that, reduce it, end up with 25. Or if you actually wanted to do the math, you could set it up like this and it'll again 50, or 2 will go into 50 25 times. And again, you're left with 25. So the answer for this one is x equals 25. Okay? So again, to kind of review this one, here was the proportion that we started out with. We set up our equation. It was 1 over 5,000 times x equals 1 over 1,000 times 5. Before I did my multiplication, I reduced. I reduced by 5, and I was left with, when I did my simple math, it was 1 over 200. So this was my next equation, 1 over 5,000 times x equals 1 over 200. I then took my 200 and divided it over here, setting my equation up like this. Instead of dividing, I flipped this 1 over 5,000 and ended up multiplying straight across. But before doing that, I reduced. And I knew that 100 would easily divide into both of these numbers. So 100 divided into 200 twice, and 100 divided into 5,000 50 times. Then I did my easy multiplication across the board. 1 times 50 is 50. 2 times 1 is 2. And I was left with this, 50 halves. Now, one way you could do is just easily see that that can be reduced, that 2 will go into 50 25 times, and you're left with this whole number. Or you could work it out if you wanted to, and you're still left with the whole number of 25. So on number 18, x equals 25. Let's do one more that's like this. This is going to be number 34 from your worksheet. 1/6 is to 9/10 as 1/2 is to x. So we'll set up our equation, again taking our two extremes and multiplying them together. So this is 1/6 x equals 9/10 times 1/2. And I'll just multiply straight across. So this ends up being 9/20. So now our equation reads 1/6 x equals 9/20. I'm now going to take this 9/20 and bring it over here and divide it. So 1/6 divided by 9/20. But instead of dividing, I'm going to flip that second fraction and multiply across. So this is actually going to turn into 1/6 times 20 over 9. And I know that I'm going to reduce right here. And I can reduce by 2. 2 will go into 20 10 times. 2 will go into 6 3 times. And now I'll just multiply straight across. So I end up with 1 times 10 is 10. 3 times 9 is 27. And my answer is 10/27. Okay, I just caught myself in a mistake. I didn't think it looked right, and it wasn't. So I'm being lazy, and instead of redoing this whole entire lesson to be perfect, I'll just point out what I did wrong and then show you how to do number 34 correctly. So right here, I flipped the wrong one. This should have been 9/20 divided by 1/6, and I put 1/6 divided by, anyway, I flipped the wrong one here. So let's redo number 34. So scratch that one. I guess to be human is to err, to easily be to err. So here we go. This is number 34, the correct version. So here's our proportion. 1/6 is to 9/10 as 1/2 is to x. We're going to set it up. It's going to be 1/6 x equals 9/10 times 1/2. And I'm just going to multiply straight across, and that's going to equal 9/20. So my equation now looks like 1/6 x equals 9/20. I'm going to take the 1/6 and bring it over, and that's where I mixed up on the other one. So this is going to come over here. Divide 1/6. But instead of dividing it, I'm going to multiply it. So it's actually going to be 9/20 times 6 over 1. That's what I did wrong. I ended up getting these two flipped around. So it's 9/20 divided by 1/6. Very important because the 1/6 is what I want to flip over to 6 over 1. Now I can reduce this. I know that 2 will go into 6 3 times. I know that 2 will go into 20 10 times. And now I'm just going to multiply straight across. And it ends up being 27/10, which is an improper fraction that I want to turn into a mixed number. So in order to do that, I'm going to take 10, 27. I know that 10 will go into 27 2 times. And my answer ends up being x equals 2 7/10. Okay, so my apologies. I'm supposed to be helping you and not confusing you. So on 34, this is how you do it. Make sure when you bring your number over to divide that you don't mix up the correct pattern or the correct route to dividing. So we had this proportion. We set up our equation. That was 1/6 x equals 9/10 times 1/2. We just multiplied across. We couldn't really reduce that any, so we multiplied across and got 9/20. We then set up our equation like this. We had 1/6 x equals 9/20. And we brought that 1/6 over to divide it. Very important that you do that correctly. So then we had this division problem. We're going to flip that 1/6 upside down so then we can multiply across. And we had 9/20 times 6 over 1. We reduced because 2 would go into 6 3 times and 2 would go into 20 10 times. So we reduced and then we multiplied across. 9 times 3 is 27. 10 times 1 is 10. We had 27/10. That's an improper fraction that we did then manipulated to turn into a mixed number, and x equals 2 7/10. Okay. That's how you do number 34. Next, we will do we'll do a few that have a percentage that we're going to have to manipulate and maneuver a little bit. So these are probably your more difficult types of proportions. And honestly, I can tell you I've never, ever, ever in healthcare had to do a medication manipulation where I was dealing with a percentage like this. That would be probably something that would go to pharmacy. But anyway, you guys need to know how to do it, so we will go through this. So this is our proportion. X is to 3/4% as 3 1/5 is to 1/20. So we've got some math we have to do. The very first thing we have to do is get rid of this percent. And the next thing we're going to have to do is take this this mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction. You might remember back in the day when we were talking about percentages, how you can take a percentage and just turn it into a fraction is by dividing it by 100. So we're going to take 3/4 divided by 100. But as you know, instead of dividing that, we can flip that upside down and then multiply straight across. So this is actually 3/4 times 1 over 100, and we end up with 3 over 400. So that's how we're going to get rid of this percentage. 3/4% is actually 3 over 400. And now we're going to get rid of this mixed number. And we're going to get rid of this mixed number by taking our denominator, multiplying it by our whole number, and adding 1. So I'll write it out for you. I'll do it up here so I save room. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. So this one's going to end up being 16/5. So now let's rewrite our equation so you kind of know what it looks like. So our equation has now become x is to 3 over 400 as 16/5 is to 1 over 200. Okay, so this is the proportion we're now working with. When we did our little math to get this percentage away, this 3/4% is actually 3 over 400. And then we did our math to get rid of this mixed number, and it became 16/5. So our proportion is now x is to 3 over 400 as 16/5 is to 1/200. Okay, so now we'll set up our equation to multiply. So this ends up being 1 over 200x equals 3/400 times 16/5. Now I'm pretty sure that I can reduce something here. And let's see, I did this earlier. What did I? 16. 16 will actually go into 400. 400 divided by 16. It'll go in there 25 times. So I'll reduce this. 16 will go into 16 one time. 16 will go into 425 times. So this becomes 25. And now I'll just multiply across. 3 times 1 is 3. And 25 times 5 is 125. So now our equation looks like this. 1/200x equals 3 over 125. Now I'm going to take this 1 over 200, this 1/200, and to bring it over to divide. So divided by 1 over 200. But I'm going to flip that instead and multiply. So it actually is 125 times 200 over 1. I know that 25 will go into both of these numbers easily, or it will reduce with 25. So 25 will go into 125 5 times. And 25 will go into 200 8 times. So now I can just multiply across. So 3 times 8 is 27, and 5 times 1 is 5. So I'm left with x equals 27/5. I'm going to take that actually, it's 24. 3 times 8 is 24. So it equals x equals 24/5. So now I'm going to take that improper fraction and I'm going to turn it into a mixed number. So 5 into 24. I know that 5 will go into 24 4 times. 4 times 5 is 20. And I'm left with 4 and 4/5 as my answer. So x equals 4 and 4/5. That's how we came to that problem. So again, the first thing we had to do is change your percents into you have to get rid of that percentage sign. When we were dealing with fractions, to get rid of that, we're going to divide it by 100. But instead of dividing, we're going to flip that second fraction over and just multiply straight across. When we did that, we ended up with 16/5, which we put right here. Or we ended up with 3 over 400, which we put right here. The next one is we took this mixed number and we turned it into an improper fraction. So when we did all of that, we ended up with this new proportion that we had to work out. We set up our equation. It was 1 over 200x equals 3/400 times 16/5. We reduced 16 went into 16 one time. 16 went into 400 25 times. When we then multiplied straight across, 3 times 1 was 3. 25 times 5 was 125. So we ended up with this next equation. It was 1 over 200x equals 3 over 125. We then brought this 1/200 over to divide it. Instead of dividing it, we flipped it upside down and we multiplied. So, but before multiplying, we reduced. We knew that 25 would go into 125 5 times, and 25 went into 200 8 times. Once we reduced, we then multiplied straight across. 3 times 8 is 24, and 5 times 1 is 5. So we were left with x equaling 24/5. We took that improper fraction and we turned it into a mixed number, and we ended up with x equaling 4 and 4/5. Okay, we'll do another one. Next, we'll do 23, number 23 from the workbook, and it is just another one that has dealing with percentages and mixed numbers that we have to get rid of. So this one is both a mixed number and a percentage. So 12.5% is to 5 as x is to 120. So the first thing that I want to do is get rid of my mixed number, and then I'll get rid of my percentage. So I'm going to take 12, I'm going to take my denominator, multiply it by my whole number, and add my numerator. So 2 times 12 is 24, plus 1 is 25. So that ends up being 25/2%. And now I want to get rid of that percentage sign. And I'm going to do that by dividing by 100. So it'll look like 25/2 divided by 100. But instead of dividing, I'm going to flip that fraction and multiply. So 25/2 times 1/100. And then I will just multiply. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to reduce. I know that I can reduce here. 25 will go into 25 one time, and 25 will go into 100 4 times. So now I'll multiply across. So 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 4 is 8. So I end up with this number being 1/8. So let's set up our proportion with this 1/8 in it. So we now have 1/8 is to 5 as x is to 120. So here's the proportion that we're dealing with. Now we'll set up our equation like we need to. It's going to be, we'll take our extremes and multiply them by each other. So 1/8 times 120 equals 5x. So when I do that, I'm going to take 1/8 times 120. I get 120 over 8, and I'm sure I can reduce that. Actually, 120 will, or 8 will go into 120. So it ends up being, 15 when I reduce that. So I have 15 equals 5x. So now I'm just going to take my 5 and I'm going to divide it over here. So take this over, divide my 15 by 5, and I end up with x equals 3. So that ended up being very simple math. Sometimes you don't ever try to complicate things and make them more difficult than they have to be. Just keep it simple if at all possible. So we started out with this proportion. We had a mixed number that was also a percentage. So first we had to get rid of the mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction. And then we got rid of the percentage part. And so again, to take a mixed number and turn it into an improper fraction, we multiplied the denominator by the whole number and then added the numerator. So we got 25/2 when we did that, and then we took away the percentage sign by dividing by 100. So 25/2 divided by 100. Instead of dividing, we flipped that second fraction and we ended up setting it up as a multiplication problem. So we had 25/2 times 1/100. We were able to reduce before we did our multiplication. 25 went into 25 one time, and 25 went in 100 4 times. So then we were able to multiply across, and we ended up with 1/8. So then we set up our proportion with our, after changing that mess of a number, we set up proportion with 1/8. So we had 1/8 is to 5 as x is to 120. We then took our two extremes and we multiplied them together, and we took our two means and we multiplied them together. When we multiplied our extremes, we ended up with 120 over 8, which reduced basically to the whole number of 15. We were able to reduce it all the way down to 15 because 8 went into 120 15 times. So we had 15 equals 5x. We then took the 5 and we divided it. We divided the 15 by the 5, and 5 will go into 15 3 times. So we were left with this nice, easy number of x equals 3. Let's do a couple more. The next one we'll do is 32. Again, I'm just trying to show you some with percentages. With this one, we just have a whole number. We don't have a fraction. So the very first thing we're going to do is take 9% and get rid of the percentage sign. So in order to do that, we're just going to take 9 and divide 100. So 9 divided by 100 equals 0.09. So now let's set up our proportion like that. So we're going to have 0.09 is to x as 11 is to 73. So this is our new proportion when we get rid of that 9% by dividing by 100. So now we'll set up our equation. We're going to take 0.09 and multiply it by 73, and that answer is going to equal 11x. So let's do that. 0.09 times 73 equals 6.57 equals 11x. We're now going to take that 11 and we're going to divide, and we end up with x equaling 0.597. Okay? So again, pretty simple. All we had to do was take that percentage and get rid of it. And when we did that, we just divided 9 by 100, and we ended up with 0.09. And then we had a nice simple proportion where we just multiplied our two extremes, multiplied our two means, and when we did that, we ended up with 6.57 equaling 11x. Then we took away that 11, brought it to the other side and divided it. And 6.75 divided by 11 gives us 0.597. So x equals 0.597. We'll do one more just to make sure you've got it. We'll do number 37. Again, just taking a percentage away. So let's do that really quick. Let's turn this 1/8% into just a simple fraction without a percentage. In order to do that, we're going to divide by 100. We're going to flip that and actually end up multiplying. And we get 1/800. So our new proportion reads 1/800 is to 1/200 as x is to 40. Now we'll multiply our two extremes, multiply our two means. So this is 1/800 times 40 equals 1/200x. So I've got 1/800 times 40. I'm pretty sure. Yep, 40 will go into 800 20 times. So 40 reduces down to 1. This 800 reduces down to 20. And now I can just multiply straight across, and I end up with 1/200 equals 20. Overlooked my H there. So this was 840, went into 800 20 times. So that's a 20, not a 200. 20 times 1 is 20. 1 times 1 is 1. So we're left with 120 equals 1/200x. I'm going to bring that over and divide it. So it's actually going to be 120 divided by 1/200. Instead of doing that, I'm going to flip that second fraction, multiply. So it's going to be 1/20 times 200. And I'm going to reduce this down really quick. So I know that 20 will go into 21 times, and I know that 20 will go into 200 10 times. When I multiply, I end up with 10/1, which is basically just the whole number 1. So x equals 10. All right, so just to kind of review this one, we started out with this proportion. The very first thing we wanted to do was get rid of this percentage. So we did that by dividing it by 100, essentially multiplying it by 100, and we got 1 over 800. So this was our new proportion that we were working with when we got rid of that percentage. We took our two extremes, multiplied them together, took our two means, multiplied them together. So we had 1 over 800 times 40. We were able to reduce. 40 went into 40 one time. 40 went into 800 20 times. And then we multiplied across. And we ended up with 1 over 20 equals 1 over 200x. We ended up bringing this 1 to over 200 and dividing. So we had 1 over 20 divided by 1 over 200. Instead of dividing it like that, we flip that second fraction, and then we have a simple multiplication problem. So it was 1 over 20 times 200, essentially. We were able to reduce because 20 will go into 20 one time, and 20 went into 200 10 times. And essentially, we're left with the whole number of 10. So we would just x equals 10. Okay, so that's proportions. You guys are actually in healthcare will do a lot of proportions. Now you'll get to the point where it's going to be very simple and you're not going to have to set up an equation or anything like that. You'll just be able to just come up with it on your own just because it'll be pretty much common sense. But to make sure that you understand the processes, you'll have to show your work with all of your problems throughout this. So Chapter 5 is the end of Unit 1. So this week you will have your Chapter 5 worksheet due, and then you'll also have your Exam 1, your Unit 1 exam that will be due as well. So work on your worksheet from Blackboard. If you have any questions about it, let me know. Work on these problems in your textbook, as many as you want to, just to kind of make sure you've grasped the concept. Hopefully I've shown you a wide array, or I've tried to kind of look through at the problems and see what look like might be the most difficult ones, and hopefully we've covered all of those, so you'll be able to work out any type of proportion. So anyway, good luck on your exam this week.